I would like to extend a warm welcome to all members of the Planning Committee, officers and members of the public in attendance at today's meeting. I am Councillor Christine Ward, Chairman of the Planning Committee. I would now like to hand over to Democratic Services to read the housekeeping notes.
Good morning. Please note this meeting is being broadcast live on the Council's website and on YouTube. It will remain available for a minimum of 12 months. Please can those in attendance use your microphone when speaking and switch it off when you finish. Please switch any mobile devices to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. If the fire alarm rings, please can everyone leave the room immediately and use the nearest fire exit. Do not use the lift. Please go to the fire assembly point located at the bottom of the car park by the garages.
Thank you. Do we have any apologies? I don't think.
We do. Councillor Malcolm Wade.
Ah, right. Okay, thank you. And can we confirm the minutes, please, for the last meeting on the 14th of August? Thank you. Declarations of interest. Councillor Glass.
Thank you. Last time this one came up, which is page 21-11329 Gangwarley Farm. Last time it came before this committee, I spoke against it. I've been advised now that I'll have to speak as a ward councillor. So if I can find space, I'll go into that space and speak as a ward councillor. Thank you.
Councillor Woods.
I declare an interest in application 24-10539 Fordingbridge for transparency purposes only, as I am one of the ward councillors for Fordingbridge. However, I've had no involvement in the planning process or the planning committee.
Thank you. Councillor Hartman.
Application 21-11329 Gangwarley Farm. It's in my ward. I'm a Forley councillor. I'm yet to comment, and I am not on the planning committee. Thank you.
Thank you. We have several speakers for the next item, but obviously I'll come back to you all after the presentation. Robert Thane was supposed to do this presentation. Unfortunately, he's not with us. So I'm going to hand over to Mark. He will be doing that. We have lots of updates on this. I trust you've all read the updates because they're quite relevant to this application. So if you'd like to go ahead, please, Mark, with your presentation. Thank you.
Chairman, thank you. Members, good morning. So before I take you through the presentation, the Chairman has just made reference to the update, so I'll just have a quick look through the update with you, and you'll see that there is some text, a couple of gremlins, I think, with the formatting of the report. So there was some text omitted by error, and that's included now in the update. And you can see it's the underlined text that's the additional narrative that goes into your report. And then over onto the second page, there is a summary of the further representation that we took receipt of from Ringwood Town Council. I understand members may have had a copy of that sent directly to them, so you'll be familiar with its content. So the update is just a summary. You can see there's 7 or 8 bullet points there with regards to the issues that are raised, and then a further 7 or 8 bullet points with regards to the officer's response, with a lot of the matters either already being dealt with in the report or summarised in that update paper. So moving to the planning application itself, starting with the red line plan. Now this is the plan that's on page 140 of your agenda. You maybe have used to have that open as we go through the photographs and plans, just so you know where we're talking about in terms of the geography. It's a location on the south side of Ringwood Town, over in the west of the district. You can see on the western side here is the Christchurch Road coming out of the town. East to west along sort of the middle part or bottom of the site is Moortown Lane. And then just off the site, you've got Crow Lane in the east. That just shows you a little bit more of the local context, showing how the site relates to some of the surrounding built form. From the aerial photograph, you can pick up that it's essentially an agricultural parcel of land, number of fields that make up the application site. And you'll be aware from your report, and we'll come on to it in a couple of slides, the application site is part of the allocation for strategic site 13. The second item on the agenda is a parcel of land off to the east of the main application site. You can see it's just been highlighted here, 23-10701. That's a matter we'll consider separate to this application, but this is just to show you the relationship between the application site, this broadly L-shaped application site, relative to the application that you will consider later. So going back to my point a minute ago about how the application site is part of strategic site 13, this is an extract from your local plan. This is on page 154 of your local plan, if you wanted to have that to hand as well. And it sets out the concept master plan for the delivery of at least 480 new homes on the south side of Ringwood. The brown sort of buff colour is the area shown for residential development. Christchurch Road is over on this western side of the plan. Moortown Lane, for your reference in terms of that plan in your agenda, running east to west through this middle part of the concept master plan, and then Crow Lane over to the east. You'll see in the very northwestern corner, there's a parcel of land in the allocation for employment. That's outside of your application sites. That's not before you today. And you'll also be aware that this particular sort of northeastern part of the site is outside of the allocation site. Access taking off Moortown Lane in this location. Areas of open space, the ANRG, and new public open space as a green wedge through the site. The hatching that's outside of the site down here is that of the green belt, so you are adjacent to but outside of the green belt, with the extension of the settlement boundary for the town being the allocation site for residential development. So as I said a moment ago, the development involves residentially led scheme on part of the allocation site for strategic site 13. It's a hybrid planning application, so you have part of the application where it's in full, all matters are for you to consider, and that is for the second bullet point at the bottom there. That is for the provision of 150 homes with the associated infrastructure, open space, ANRG, the vehicular access to Moortown Lane. And then the second part of the application is in outline. So you're only looking at the consideration of the access, and all the other matters are reserved for the further 293 dwellings. Hopefully that's clear on the screen. If not, I'll try and take you through it with the cursor, but this is to show the phasing. So the application site is still shown outlined in red on the aerial photography here, and you can see how the red edge sits outside or omits the application allocation employment land up here to the northwest, and the further phase of land to the northeast that I said was outside of the application site is excluding in terms of part of the allocation. Within the site, there's a blue dotted line which comes in this location crudely, if I follow it as best I can, in the hope that you can see it on the screen. That is phase one. Phase one being the detailed part of the application. So that's where your 150 homes are fully detailed. That's where the open space and ANRG is proposed. The other parcel of land to the north of phase one and the parcel to the east of phase one in this location, that's all phase two. So that's the outline part of the proposal. So just looking at some photographs on the site access, again, the plan probably helps, but you've got that page 140 of your agenda with the site location plan as well. The access consistent with your site allocation and your development plan, policy for strategic site 13 shows primary access off of Moortown Lane into the site, and it's in the approximate location of the existing field gate, and that comes off with a simple priority T-junction. You can see here the arrangement of that phase 1 still shown with the blue dotted line. Photograph then looks eastwards into phase 2, over towards Crow Lane. Again, you get a feel for the condition of the site, agricultural land, Crow Lane in the distance. Turning around in phase 2 and looking northwards towards the edge of the application site and beyond into land that is part of the allocation but not part of the application site. And then turning, looking back towards the northwest. So Moortown Lane, the other side of the hedge on the left-hand side of this photograph, the application site predominantly for phase 1 in the middle ground, and the open space ANRG in the foreground of this photograph, Christchurch Road running over in the distance. Moving towards the centre of the site and continuing to look northwest, you can see there's a panoramic shot there looking across phase 1 and into phase 2 in the distance. And then looking essentially through phase 1 westwards towards the properties that are on Christchurch Road that back onto the site. So taking you through the parameter plans, there's a suite of plans that accompany the planning application. And I'll take you through some of the detailed plans that deal with the 150 homes that are in detail, but there's also a set of parameter plans that look at guiding the development, guiding the principles for delivery of the wider site, both phases 1 and 2. And that first one of those is the land use parameter plan. The land use parameter plan shows in sort of the pinky colour on my screen, the area that's identified for residential development, and then the green shows where your open space and ANRG will be, including pockets of informal space and play, which you'll see in a moment. The grey being key pieces of infrastructure and access, and there's a significant or an S-shaped grey piece of road here, which is part of the primary road network which crosses the ANRG, being this north-south green wedge through the site. And detailed work has been done with the applicant on delivery of that in terms of its design approach, and I'll take you through that in a moment. The second parameter plan is one of movement and access, how we're going to get through the site, how we're going to get around the site. And you would have read in your report, the application seeks to create a street hierarchy. The primary roads through the site, the primary north-south corridor is that of the blue dotted line, which obviously will extend up to the application site and potentially link forward into other parcels of land under separate ownership, which would then be consistent with an access to the northwest as per your site allocation in the local plan. There's also the road continuing primary and the primary road network east to west through again to other third-party land, where hopefully the connection can be made should that come forward out to the east to provide the east-west connectivity through the site that is also shown on the concept master plan in your local plan. So after the blue primary street network, you would have read that there's a secondary street network that's shown in that purple dotted loop, slightly different arrangement in terms of the street and their design. And then off of that, there's a number of tertiary streets which go into the different development parcels. The yellow solid line here is starting to show the key pieces of cycle and pedestrian infrastructure through the open space. The density plan is the next parameter plan to take you through. And this is looking at essentially the two different shades of yellow that you can see on the plan. On the outer edge here, you've got the lighter shade of yellow, which wraps around the south side, the western side, and the eastern side of this western part of the built form, if you like. Again, you've got the blue line showing where phase 1 sits. And you would have read in your report, the lower density areas could be down to as much as 25 dwellings per hectare, and in the higher density parts of the site, it gets up to the 40 dwellings per hectare. Overall, the officer report suggests there's just over 30 dwellings. I think it's about 38 dwellings per hectare as an average. The density lower on the outer edge sits with the character areas, which I'll come on to in a moment, but trying to think about how the site as an allocation relates to the settlement of the southern edge of Ringwood as you go off to the west and to the northwest. Building scale, so not another parameter plan related to the design and the layout of the proposal, and does have a relationship with the density plan. Here you've got two different shades of purple. The higher or darker purple looks at potential for some higher buildings in the centre of the site, overlooking the junction of the primary road network and this central space. When I say higher, up to 3 stories. Elsewhere, the pink or the lighter purple is predominantly 2 stories with occasional 2.5 maybe, to create a feature building, framing a view, turning a corner, trying to provide some legibility to the layout. In terms of phase 1, you'll see as we come on to some of the details in a minute, you'll see that there's a band of the darker purple in this location here, which is the up to 3 stories. The only 3-story building is in this location, right in the centre, but to the western edge of that band on the south side of the primary road. And that's a pair of townhouses that go up to 3-story on that corner. Other than that, it's predominantly 2.5 and 2-story homes. Thinking about the landscape parameters, you'll see here there's a series of different shades of green. So we're looking at open space, informal open space, areas of play which are marked by the asterisks, and then the lighter green is your extent of alternative natural recreational green space, your ANRG. You would have read in the report about the housing mix and what's proposed to be delivered as a result of the application. I touched on the first phase 1 is the full application, the full part of the application. That gives you up to, or gives you 150 new homes. You can see on the bottom right-hand corner the total, and you can see how that is split between some of the smaller units and then the family size units. And as a whole, so this is the 2 phases together, you've got a scheme for up to 443 new homes. So now we get into some of the detail of phase 1, and you can see the application, or the slides now zoom in on the application phase 1, which was that blue dotted line, specifically with regards to housing and how it relates to the ANRG. Moortown Lane running east to west on the bottom of the site here, in terms of your reference point, Christchurch Road, up on the left-hand side of this slide or to the west. And you'll see the distribution of homes around the primary road network, which comes north and south through the middle of the site and then runs east-west towards the ANRG at the north or the top of this screen. And then the secondary road network coming through and wrapping around in this southern part of phase 1. Distribution of houses, as I said, it's 150 homes, and you can see here you've got the red spots are showing those that are being offered for affordable rent, the yellows showing those that are being offered for social rent, and the blues are your shared ownership products. So moving to the detailed access arrangements, I showed you the photo of the field gate on Moortown Road earlier. This is, again, the same photo just from the other side of the access. So this is looking almost northeast along Moortown Lane. And you can see here how the access is proposed. It's a simple T-junction. There's a 3-metre wide footway on the eastern side with a crossing point across Moortown Lane just off the photograph to access the land to the south side. And then from the access, heading westwards towards Christchurch Road, and some work to the junction on Christchurch Road with Moortown Lane in terms of the arrangement of lanes and road markings. There is a new pedestrian cycleway coming out of the site onto Moortown Lane, which links round to other infrastructure into the town. The narrative in the report you would have seen about the widening of Moortown Lane from Christchurch Road to the access, and that's shown in the drawing, and that's something to be secured by the Planning Permission. Looking at how that relationship a little bit wider in terms of its context and to Christchurch Road, that pedestrian cycle route I just mentioned coming out down to Christchurch Road, and how it relates to further on-road routes heading northwards towards the town. So moving further afield, this is towards the northern part of the site, just from the road or the track coming up from the existing allotments and linking in to the new development to the north of the site, Ring 3, I believe, and Yarrow Road. This is on the Crow Arch Lane, and it's proposed to install some additional footway on the western side with a crossing point to get in and join up with the footway and into the estate on the right-hand side of that photograph. And then at the other end of Crow Arch Lane, where it meets Crow Lane, coming off of the Castleman Trail, which is this loop, sweep of a route on the right-hand side, there's a proposed crossing point and some further infrastructure in terms of footpath to get to the eastern end of Crow Arch Lane and then onwards and into the open space associated with the Ring 3 development. So that the crossing will come across the photograph here and wrap round with new footway where the wooden posts are. Back to Moortown Lane, and at the very eastern end of Moortown Lane and end of the application site, almost at its junction with Green Lane, there's a proposed further crossing point to link into the existing public right-of-way. That public right-of-way goes through the site and heads northwards again towards the Ring 3 development, and will tie the developments together in terms of pedestrian connectivity. To take you through some of the constraints, this is showing the Environment Agency's flood zone mapping, and you'll see the application site where it says almost the holdings. The application site is essentially right in the middle where it's white. Moortown Lane at the bottom of the slide. But the application site, as your report says, is essentially in flood zone 1. So that's where we should be focusing development. That's the right place for development. And also some mapping in terms of surface water and known areas of surface water pressure. Again, the application site is not subject to that as a significant constraint. Notwithstanding that, the application, in terms of its detail, the first 150 homes comes with a detailed surface water drainage strategy, which deals with a number of swales, basins, and SUDS, sustainable urban drainage systems, in order to suitably manage surface water drainage. So moving to the landscape management and landscape master plan to help assimilate and integrate the new built form into the southern edge of the town. I mentioned when I took you through the parameter plans, how there's the ANRG as a green lung or green wedge coming through the middle of the application site, consistent with your concept master plan in your development plan for strategic site 13. I'll take you through some of the more detailed points as we go, but you would have read in your report the quantum of ANRG is acceptable and meets the policy requirements associated with the number of dwellings that are being delivered. There's some narrative in your update paper about the smaller units and study rooms in terms of the representations from the town council and how they should be accounted for in bed spaces, and therefore requirements for ANRG go up. You will have read, or you will read in your update paper, the officer interpretation and view on that relative to the nationally described space standards for those study rooms. The ANRG that is put before you and put in your recommendation is acceptable in terms of meeting the needs of the housing proposed. So taking you through those, the ANRG, it's essentially in two parcels. You've got the southern part here, which is looking over, fronted by phase 1. There's some PED cycle infrastructure coming along the south side, on the northern side of Moortown lane, as I showed you with the earlier photographs, linking down into the pedestrian cycleway. And then there's the northern element, which will be delivered as part of the phase 1 work, but will be related to phase 2. The play area, so this is the northernmost of the play areas. You would have read in your report the play officer was happy with the level of equipment proposed. It's considered as a reasonable level of play value to make it an interesting place to visit, and will provide a good facility for the new residents, and because its relationship to the north of the site can link into other recent developments through the PED cycle network that's proposed. And then coming to the southern part, again, infrastructure in terms of play value is good, and it's all related slightly to the more western side, some of the play, which is relative to its relationship to the phase 1 housing, which you can see in a minute in terms of getting appropriate natural surveillance. I mentioned the ANRG and the road crossing earlier on because it's something that does dissect the open space. Interestingly, your concept master plan in your local plan shows the road crossing the ANRG, so it is in part of your policy, but trying to make sure through the design that the route through the ANRG has some form of priority to pedestrians, trying to make sure that that space is still an appropriate alternative natural green space. So you'll see here the road narrows somewhat. There's potentially a ramp up to make sure that it's slow speeds, priority is given to pedestrians, change in surfacing, all focusing on making sure that the green space, the ANRG, takes priority. I touched on street hierarchy earlier when I was looking at the parameter plan, and for streets, this is showing it again in a bit more detail, the darker blue being your primary road network, the lighter blue, your secondary street network, the red are those tertiary roads, the shared surfaces, and beyond that there's some dotted green roads at the end of those shared streets, which are private driveways. In this location over on the right-hand side, you get a bit of a feel again for that leap. I took you through the second of the play areas, and I mentioned how the equipment had been arranged to sit on the western side of that leap area, so it's relative to the properties that sit around this southeastern corner. In terms of parking, there's a mixture of driveway parking. I'm not sure the plan's overly clear, but you've got the lighter blue for driveway parking. The darker blue shows where you've got a mixture of garages and carports. So there's a mixture of parking on the scheme. You'll see, hopefully it's clear, that through some of the driveway parking, it's between the houses. So you've got house parking. The arrangement of houses fronting the road, some of them are set quite far forward, some of them are set slightly further back. But in terms of car dominance, the cars hopefully will be put between a number of the houses rather than forward of the houses, as has been commented in some of the design narrative. There are areas in this location, for example, where parking is forward of the homes, but it's not a common theme throughout. On the right-hand side, again, I'm not sure how clear it is for you, there's a number of red spots on the plan, which are showing the charging point locations for the relevant dwellings. Within your report, you would have looked at the design narrative and you would have read about the character areas and how there are 3 character areas, the Crow Gardens, the Crow Boulevard and the Moortown suburbs. So this is just giving you the visual representation of where those areas are. The green being the Crow Gardens, so the lower density part of the site, the bit that's looking out over the countryside to the south and looking over the ANRG and open space to the east and southeast. That's in green. The boulevard, Crow Boulevard, essentially lines and fronts the primary road network as it heads northwards through the site. And then that in blue is the Moortown suburb character area. And there's narrative in your report about how those 3 areas relate and how they're distinguished. Let's get to the detail. What do the houses look like? And you'll see from the report, there's narrative about the design. There's criticism of the design in place. On balance, we're of the view that the housing as proposed is acceptable, hence the recommendation before you. But looking at Crow Gardens, so just to go back, Crow Gardens is the green, the lower density part of the site or the outer edge of the site. And you'll see we're looking at 2-storey dwellings, domestic in proportion, some 2.5, where you've got some dormer windows here, some asymmetrical roofs, almost a nod to arts and crafts and a slightly more contemporary approach. You've got a varied roofscape with gables, crop gables, chimneys, but a relatively spacious street scene in terms of that outer edge. I think it's these 2.5 plots here are the ones that are overlooking the open space and the leap to give that natural surveillance. Crow Boulevard is the part of the site that looks up the main primary street. And again, you'll see that there's a variety of different styles of architecture. There's some timber cladding, there's some render now, there's some small little gablets that break the eaves as you go along to give some variety, texture to the front of the buildings. Some of the gables are steeper than some of the others. You've still got some variety in terms of roof materials. It's a slate and there's a concrete tile in this location. Details such as the porches, canopies, there's brick banding, the soldier courses to give some detail. And you also here appreciate how we step up to that 3-storey building that I mentioned when we were going through the building heights plan. So the primary road is running from the south to the north along this bottom image. And then into the suburbs, much more lower density 2-storey homes. Here it's a bit more windows tucked right up under the eaves. You've got some hipped roof features, more simple in terms of its architecture, a bit more cottagey in some regards. And then zooming in and giving you a bit more of a flavour, a bit more closer look at some of the architecture. Again, some of the detailing, different roof materials, there's chimneys, there's porches, brick banding to give some detail. This is a representation of one of the small terraces of 4. These are going to be affordable homes, as you can see on the top of the plan there. Even though they're affordable, there's still detailing, brick detailing in the gabling, and articulation around things like the windows and the doors. And then the varied mixture of materials, again, thinking about the cladding as a weatherboarding, as a different material to be used. But essentially, consistently, red brick, you'll notice, and a roofscape of red clay, or red concrete, sorry, and slate roofing. A variety of hipped, gabled and crop gables. And then the 3-storey townhouses, which I mentioned, of which there's only 2 in phase 1. So just taking you through those elevations. And this is showing that building story layout. And I mentioned the pink ones. That's the 3-storey. That's the 3-storey townhouse, just that pair in phase 1. The blues are the 2.5 stories. So again, fronting the primary road as it runs east to west at the northern part of phase 1. In the Crow Boulevard, where you'd expect maybe some of the buildings to feature that type of architecture in terms of presentation to the road. And then as you come down the eastern side, some further 2.5 buildings overlooking the open space. 1 or 2 as you come along the south side on Moortown Road, which are just featuring certain vistas and architectural detail and legibility. So that's taking you through the main slides and main parts of the application. Just to take you through the summary then. As I said earlier, and I said a couple of times, the application site doesn't provide an application to cover the entirety of your SS13 allocation. It's only part of the allocation, but it would provide, you see there, 92% of the housing that is identified in SS13. You'll also be alive to the housing land supply position that the district finds itself in. Those sort of issues have been before you before, but this will make a significant contribution to the district's housing need. It's a site that's allocated for housing in your local plan and will make a significant contribution to that. In addition, it will deliver 133 affordable homes across all the tenures that are required in your plan at a policy requirement level of tenure. And therefore, that weighs heavily in favour of the application. There's no objections from your statutory consultees. You would have read there's concerns expressed maybe from the environmental design team, but the statutory consultees have raised no objection. And there's a package of 106 planning obligations to be secured that will ensure appropriate mitigation is in place in terms of transport, in terms of rights of way, cycle routes, habitat mitigation, impact on European sites, nitrate neutrality, ANRG and landscaping. There's narrative in the report, and I've touched on it a minute ago, about whether the design quality is sufficient enough to meet your tests in your planning policy. As officers, we've had regard to the tests in your policy. We've had tests in regard to tests in the framework, the National Planning Policy Framework. We are of the view, hence the recommendation before you, that the application is acceptable in its form. Officers have worked with the applicant over a number of years, over 2 years now, to get it into the shape that it's in, that it's before you. And the design is at a point where it's considered acceptable. There's an acceptance on the third bullet point there, that, and it's throughout your report, that there are cases where the application doesn't meet all your policies, and it doesn't meet the policies of the Ringwood Neighbourhood Plan in full. The neighbourhood plan, you'll be aware, is now part of your adopted development plan as a result of the referendum in the summer. That needs to be weighed in the planning balance, that conflict, whether it's with the neighbourhood plan comments, policies, whether it's with your policy ENB3. That all goes into the mix, and you have to weigh that up, as the officer has in reaching their recommendation. We've come to the view at the bottom there are other considerations that we've assessed: archaeology, mineral extraction, heritage, noise. Those matters can be dealt with through suitable planning conditions, and there's a significant package to be secured through the 106 legal agreement, in addition to income through the community infrastructure levy in the future. So you'll be aware that paragraph 11D of the National Planning Policy Framework comes into play, the so-called tilted balance, and you have to balance the material considerations and look at the harms and weigh those against the benefits and come to a view as to whether there's any adverse impact that significantly and demonstrably outweighs the benefits. Officers have come to the view that the benefits outweigh the harm, essentially, hence the recommendation that is before you. So finally, we're getting towards the end, and apologies for the length of time it's taken me to take you through this, but it's a significant application for the district, for Ringwood as a town, so we wanted to be thorough. The recommendation is essentially to delegate to the service manager for a reconsultation with Natural England to make sure they agree that we are in a place where we can adopt the applicant's shadow HRA, and then for the completion of the 106 agreement, that covers all the bullet points there that will go into the agreement, and then conditions as per the recommendation that's before you. I have nothing else, Chairman, unless there are any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that presentation. We'll now come to speakers. We have Sarah Bouden, who represents the planning agent, Councillor Mary Booth from Ringwood Town Council. We also have Councillor Heron and Councillor Hayward. All of you will have 3 minutes, okay? So we'll go to Sarah Bouden first. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, councillors. So pre-application discussions with the council's planning team have been ongoing since August 2020, with the design being updated during the process to reflect feedback received and provide a scheme that meets with the aspirations of New Forest District Council for this important strategic site. As detailed in the officer's presentation, the site is allocated for at least 480 dwellings. Therefore, the proposed housing lies within the Ringwood settlement boundary and outside of the Greenbelt. The proposal for 443 new homes as part of this application will make a significant contribution to the district's housing land supply and will provide 92% of the minimum required for this site. The development will deliver 133 affordable dwellings with a policy-compliant tenure split comprising a suitable mix of housing typologies and sizes, and 75 affordable units will be provided in the first phase. Across the site, the proposed affordable housing includes 69 one- and two-bed affordable rental homes, a housing typology for which there is an acute and demonstrable need in the district. The design and layout has evolved over the course of the application to mitigate impacts on neighbouring dwellings through reduced densities and increased separation distances. To address comments received from the Town Council and local sports groups, the football pitches south of Moortown Lane will be retained in situ. The proposal will provide suitable public open space in the form of ANRG, informal open space and play areas. The application includes public open space on a north-south axis and will connect the town to an existing football club and allotments through new routes and pedestrian crossings on Moortown Lane. The proposed play spaces have been designed in close liaison with the council's open space officer and will benefit the wider community, including play spaces for older children and younger teenagers, designed in accordance with the Make Space for Girls principles. The proposed package of cycle and pedestrian improvements, which would be secured through Section 106 agreement, will provide links to the north, south and west, and this would provide access to the town centre, local schools and the wider right-of-way network. The site access from Moortown Lane and the Crow Arch Lane access to the north will be delivered prior to the first occupation in Phase 1 to allow the local connections and benefits to be realised from day one. It is testament to the collaborative design approach that we sit before you now with no technical objection to the scheme. In summary, the scheme has been designed to a high standard and will make a significant contribution to the district's open market and affordable housing supply, and will also provide improved access to the town centre, local schools and the network of surrounding public open spaces. So I would kindly ask that the committee follow the officer's recommendation to approve this application for new homes and the related benefits it will bring to the local area. Many thanks for your time.
Good morning.
Did you hear me? I didn't have my mic on. Okay.
Yes, I did. Good morning. Firstly, I'd like to say that Ringwood Town Council understands the need for housing in the district and does not object to the principle of developing the land allocated in Local Plan Policy SS13. However, it is our duty to ensure it meets the needs of Ringwood. I cannot repeat all of our written submission in 3 minutes, so I have 3 issues to highlight. We consider that the officer's report still fails to have proper regard to the legal status of the Ringwood Neighbourhood Plan. A neighbourhood plan cannot lawfully include policies that contravene the local plan, hence all policies are valid. Secondly, as in the officer's report, this is not an application for SS13, it's only for the land owned by the applicant. Importantly, this means that despite what was said in the presentation, it has insufficient land to provide the required ANRG, and hence the separate application on the agenda today. This breaches Local Plan Policy ENV1. It does not comply with the master planning objectives for the site. The access point to the northwest of the site, which would provide connection to the sound centre, is not included because it is not under the ownership of the applicant. This is contrary to SS13 and to RMP Policy R1. We have a need for smaller housing, especially to buy, hence our policies R5 and R6. Phase 1 does nothing to address this. Whilst the current officer reports that the studies are not an extra bedroom, the view of Richard Natt in August 2023 was that they were. And if you consider that they are extra bedrooms, then in this phase, the first phase, open market housing contains only 3% 2-bedroom and a whopping 67% 4-bedroom or more. Clearly contrary to Local Plan Policy HOU1 and our own neighbourhood plan policies. Suffice to say that in total, in our view, this application does not conform with at least 5 local plan policies and 6 neighbourhood plan policies, so 11 in total. The officer's report, in our view, contains factual inaccuracies, is legally flawed in that it's not give due weight to the Ringwood Neighbourhood Plan, and tilts the balance consistently in the favour of the applicant. In light of all of this, we fail to see how this application, as it stands, could be approved by this committee.
Thank you, Chairman. Very good factual report. Please, sir, can we have our money back? That is what this application is. The developers got it wrong. They didn't manage to assemble the site. They can't get the accesses that they require. And in a desperate bid to recover their funds, this is what they've put in. Unfortunately, government policy is in favour of planning. Our planning officers are concerned about the risks involved in going to appeal and those independent thinkers, the planning inspectorate.
Excuse me, could you leave the chamber with that? Thank you.
Sorry, Chairman. Are concerned about the independent thinkers of the planning inspectorate, and the consequence is that what we have is what the government want, housing for today, as they call it. I look at this and I see the slum of tomorrow. The accesses that they promise in the future, I have never seen a developer deliver the plentiful of tomorrow if you just give them today. They still have totally unable to deliver on all their access routes. And if you can't deliver on the access routes, you shouldn't put a single brick on the floor. The other issue that I've got with them is the fact that our policy is against removal of formal recreational open space. They are planning to use part of our formal recreational open space as their walkway to deliver on that. Our own policy requires that they replace that. There is no suggestion in any of this that they are going to replace the land that they remove. And our policy does not say but you can take a little bit. It's very clear. You cannot touch that open space. So the footway is technically, under our own policies, undeliverable. It also is pretty pointless because it takes you from the north to the south, and to go back into the town, you've got to cross that road again to get to the north. The sight lines on Moortown Road at the petrol station are useless, so it's all very well. So we have one access road delivered with poor sight lines. We have two that won't be delivered ever because they can't do it. And we're trying to put all the houses on half the development site. Is that greed or incompetence? You can judge for yourself. This application should not be granted. It is nowhere near the level that it should be, and I cannot understand how our officers see fit to bring this before us. Is it just because it's taken 2 years and they still can't fix it? I don't know. I leave it to the planning commission to decide.
Thank you. Councillor Hayward.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you. We've heard two good speeches there to giving the local situation on this development. So I speak as Ward Councillor for Ringwood North and Ellingham, as Chair of the Ringwood Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group. I sit on Ringwood Town Council, but I'm not on the Planning Committee. I am on the Planning Committee of Ellingham, Harbridge and Ibbsley Council, but this application isn't in that parish. So while this development is not in my ward, as the biggest of the 3 strategic sites in the area, this development provides new housing capacity for the people in the whole of Ringwood and further afield. Now, the Ringwood Neighbourhood Plan was developed by a group of dedicated volunteers over a number of years, including a former portfolio holder for planning of this council. And with the assistance of professionals, they developed a body of evidence to support the plan's policies. So its policies are rooted in real-world needs and issues. With a 59% turnout in the referendum and an 84% yes vote, it quite likely carries more democratic legitimacy than the majority of neighbourhood plans in the country. More to the point, it has direct democratic legitimacy in a way that local plans, including this council's, do not. We on the Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group are not NIMBYs. Our aim in developing this plan was not to hold up development, it was to ensure that development in our town was sustainable for the future, delivering benefits for people living in Ringwood today and for their families, as well as some people that may move in from outside the town. You've heard from Councillor de Boos how many Ringwood neighbourhood plan policies are not conformed to. You've also heard how many of this council's local plan policies the application doesn't conform to. This is highly disappointing. What is particularly disappointing is that the property mix seems to be structured to provide a preponderance of bigger houses with a larger number of bedrooms when the neighbourhood plan evidenced a need for smaller houses of 1 or 2 bedrooms. For a sustainable future, we must have a genuine property ladder that residents can climb through their lives, not simply make the top rungs bigger while having no lower rungs for people to step on and move up. I'm mindful of the need for this council to deliver on targets for a number of new homes in this district. I'm also mindful of a higher target that is currently under consultation. But while delivering on numbers, we must create a sustainable future for our settlements and our residents. According to the current local plan, Moortown Lane, when built out, represents the largest development in Ringwood and the surrounding areas in the next few decades. It is essential that we get this right. I ask this committee not to delegate the application as recommended and as an absolute minimum to encourage a developer to come forward with a development that more closely matches the democratically expressed wishes of the people in Ringwood and this council's local plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We also have with us Mr. Charles Lewis, is it? Sorry, somebody's writing, I can't quite understand here. Applicant? No? No, but you're here to answer questions?
Yes.
Okay, from the applicant, they will answer questions. And Mr. Steve Jenkins, who will answer questions on transport. So, questions, please. Sir Richards.
I was wondering what kind of heating these houses will have. I couldn't suss it out from all the blurb. And also, will they have solar panels?
So in terms of heating, we would follow current building regulations, and our standard house types all have solar panels.
So just what type of heating would that be? Because building regulations do allow gas heating, but given the climate crisis, that doesn't seem like a very long-term solution.
So we are entering a transitionary period in terms of heating, but at this moment in time, phase 1 would likely see the use of gas boilers, with phase 2 likely incorporating air source heating.
Councillor Glass.
Thank you. The members of Ringwood Council have come up with some items that didn't really come out in the officer's presentation. What I'd like to know is, what is the actual access to the site and what is proposed and possibly can't go ahead?
Excuse me, can you please stop interrupting proceedings? Thank you. Councillor Glass, would you like to continue?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify what accesses are achievable now and what accesses, as we heard from Ringwood Council, are not achievable at this moment.
Chairman, I will take you through as best I can on this. This is your concept master plan. This goes back to your local plan. And this is, I think, the point that the Town Council representation made and also local members have made with regards to the application site being part of your allocation rather than the whole of the allocation. So you'll see on the allocation in your local plan, you have the access off of Moortown Lane in the south here, that red arrow. That's in your application site. That's being delivered. That's part of the proposal. The application site cannot provide this access off Crow Lane in the east because this part of the site, this part of the allocation, is outside of the application site. It's not in control of the applicant. So that's one access they can't deliver as part of this application. The second one is the access to the north-western corner through the purple, which is the allocation for employment. The application site, again, does not extend that far north, so that access is not part of the application that's before you. What the application does, if I take you through to the transport plan, is it provides connectivity from the main access and the primary road network right up to the boundary of its site. So as and when future parcels of land come forward in the northwest or over to the east, when the other landowners look to bring forward part of their allocation, the connectivity is there in order to be able to deliver that connection to Crow Lane and that connection to the northwest. But in terms, I think, of answering your question and picking up the point that the Town Council have made, Councillor, it's just the Moortown Lane access that is in the application. Does that help?
Thank you. Just amazes me that this was not mentioned during the officer's presentation. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Crisell.
Could I ask the officer, how normal is this situation whereby, you know, we're left in this sort of grey area and that, you know, this may or may not happen in the future? Is this a normal situation that we would find ourselves in?
It's not uncommon. From my experience, when you're dealing with large sites, land assembly is often one of the biggest headaches when you're trying to deliver a strategic site. If you have one landowner, it makes life a lot easier, obviously. What you have here, though, is a scheme that's before you, which shows the access coming off of Moortown Lane, as I just answered Councillor Glass's question. The transport work has been interrogated by the Highway Authority, and the advice that we are receiving is that the quantum of development that's proposed can be delivered and mitigated for and is safe based on the access arrangement that's before us and before you. Hence, we have no technical objection. The recommendation is what it is. It could be that those the other parts of the allocation site will come forward in the future. And when they do, we're making sure that through this application, it provides for that connection so that it's always going to be achievable when we go forward in the future. But it's not uncommon, I think, in answer to your question, that you have land ownership and land assembly complications when you're looking at delivering strategic sites. But this one, in terms of the scheme before you on its merits, can be delivered in a way that has no objection from your Highway Authority.
In the 2 years that you've been working with the applicant, have you had conversations with the people that own the land that the road would like to go through, or you've not had that conversation?
But personally, I haven't had those conversations. In terms of whether officers have, I don't think I'd be in the right place to be able to advise you if that's a conversation that we've had. The applicants in the room, they may be able to tell you about third-party conversations. I know that the County Council is one of the landowners, certainly the land to the north. So there's certainly some public sector engagement that could be undertaken.
Thank you. Would either of you like to comment on that?
Yes, Chairman. The two accesses which we're unable to include within our application, that being the northwest to Wellworthy Way and the northeast to Crow Lane, will require the land within the allocation to come forward. That land is owned by Hampshire County Council, so they have the benefit of the allocation. We understand it's their intention at some point to come forward with their own proposal. All we can do within our application site is build the road up to our boundary. That is something which is secured within condition 13 of the papers, Chairman, which requires us to build the internal road to connect to little I, the employment land in the northwest of the allocation site, and little I2, the residual housing area in the northeast, prior to the 200th occupation of the application site. So by the time we occupy 200 dwellings on our site, we'll have to have built a road to adoptable standards right up to our ownership boundary, thereby facilitating future connection as and when the County Council bring forward the remainder of this allocated site.
Thank you. Councillor Brand.
Thank you. I wondered if it was possible to just show the area that was included in the strategic sites and what is being delivered and owned by the applicant again, please, so I can understand about the size of the amount of housing.
Does that one help? So that's the extent of the allocation. That's the allocation in your local plan. So the easiest way to describe it is by going a canter through a couple of slides, and I'll try and show you. But in terms of geographical features, as a reference point to help you, you've got the Christchurch Road over on the western side in this location. You've got Crow Lane to the east and Moortown Lane to the south. Those are your sort of fixed points. Crow Arch Lane running also east to west on the northern side of the site. So those are your sort of main geographical points, if you like. And if you go back one, this is the site plan you can see also on page 140 of your agenda. Christchurch Road is here. Moortown Lane's here. So the bits that's omitted from the allocation is this corner here and this parcel up here. There's narrative in your report on that particular point.
Sorry, Chairman, you can tell me off because I'm used to it. But the officers just said that the parts that were missing out were the two parts he indicated, but actually the allocated site stretched south of that as well, didn't it? For open space and such like. So didn't actually our site, when we originally drew it, have a great big chunk of land to the south of this current site that's on the picture?
I'm trying to understand if it was a full picture, and we've said it was 480 houses for that full picture, but now we've cut a third of it off. Should that have then been like 300 and something houses, and we're still going for 440?
Chairman, I'm trying to find the relevant reference in the report that's before you, but there is a line in there with regards to a bit of work that was done by the case officer for capacity of what happens when that extra land comes forward in terms of the amount of homes that it could deliver. There is, when you look back at your site allocation, you'll see this sort of blue horizontal hatching is land that is subject to flooding. So that's clearly a constraint. And you remember I took you through the flood risk constraint maps, and that area was covered by that. So it's okay because maybe that's part of the ANRG, but certainly it's a constraint for delivery of that northeastern parcel in terms of the ability to deliver it all as housing. The officer's report, if I can try and find the relevant paragraph, I think it was around 80 additional homes, bearing in mind that the north western corner, where the blue shading is for employment purposes. So that omission won't be for housing. It will be the land to the north, northeast, but that is somewhat constrained by the need to provide open space and the flood constraint.
If I understand that correctly, with the land that we don't currently have within this remit, it would have been extra 80 houses. So we would have gone from 480 to 400 as the amount of homes potentially.
Sorry, could you say that again, Councillor?
So you just said that the parcel of land that wasn't included would have been 80 houses. So for the parcel of land that is included, it would be, we would have said we would be looking at housing for 400 houses on this parcel of land.
On the whole of the allocation,
Am I wrong? Makes sense to me.
the allocation allows for up to 400, at least 480 new homes in your allocation. You've got,
Because we can't deliver the other piece of land, which you just said was 80. So really, the land that we're looking at is 400. We would potentially.
that's one way you could look at it, yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, let's have it now. Okay.
So sorry, I also did read in the report about the size of the studies / bedrooms, and I think it was 5 something meters and something else. I just that does sound quite a large size for a study. I know you mentioned that it isn't a bedroom, it's definitely a study, and I wanted to clarify how that we determine the difference between a bedroom and a study.
I can. And while you were putting that question to me, it's page 85 of your agenda, towards the bottom, the penultimate paragraph sets out that the residual land could provide circa 80 additional dwellings. In terms of studies, I'll take you to your update paper to deal with that particular point. The issue on area of the room, the update takes you back to the nationally described space standards that are prescribed nationally, as it suggests, on what is an acceptable minimum level of accommodation when you're delivering new buildings. And that, in that case, that sets out a single bedroom should be of a certain area, at least 7.5 square metres, and should be at least 2.25 metres wide. So that's the government standard for new development and single bedrooms. The study rooms in those smaller units that the town council have made reference to, the case officer has done some analysis. You can see on the second bullet point of the update in response to the town council's representation, there's a range that those studies fall into from 5.4 square metres to 7.4 square metres. So that falls below the nationally described space standard threshold. And for that reason, we've concluded that they're not counted as single bedrooms.
Can I just come back to the agent? You wanted to make some comment?
It was the officers made reference I was going to make in terms of the additional amounts of dwellings that could be provided. So that's already been covered. But in response to the point around the study rooms, just from a market perspective, Crest as well as other national house builders have noticed a massive demand, obviously, since COVID for people working from home. So they've actually had to amend house types to accommodate that. So there is a real market demand for study rooms as part of homes in order to address that demand for working from home, which is a lot more prevalent since COVID.
Thank you. Councillor Richards.
Just on the study rooms again, I'm looking at a plan on my screen, which is for plot 7H14, etc. I wondered if you could put it up on the thing.
If you let me know when to stop.
I don't think it's on your, it's in one of the housing packs.
Okay.
No, it's the floor plan, sorry.
Do you know which plot it was?
Floor plan, 7H14.
We've got a selection and a flavour of the elevations here, so whether it's going to pick up that particular plot, I don't know. Do you know which plot number it was, you said?
Well, it's floor plans for plot 7H14, 40H, 81H, 115H, and lots more. Anyway, it's in the housing pack, which is a separate file. Anyway, the point is that it shows a study room of 7.5 square metres. It looks identical to one of the bedrooms of 7.5 square metres. I mean, normally people sell a house with a set number of bedrooms and then people decide whether they want to use them as a bedroom or something else. But it just looks like a bedroom to me. How is it not a bedroom?
The answer I can give, Chairman, is we would rely on the nationally described space standards, as I said, and I've seen appeals where rooms smaller than the described standards have failed and been dismissed because the level of accommodation and living amenity has been unacceptable. So the standard is a recognised standard, it's a national standard, and the assessment that your case officer has done has come to the view that there's a range, and some of them are quite close to being a small single bedroom, some of them are not. But for the purposes of the assessment, and the whole point of this assessment is about demonstrating the extent and requirement of ANRG, it's appropriate, to my mind, to use the nationally described standard, and on that basis, a single bedroom should be as those parameters. The study rooms fall short of a single bedroom size.
Just coming back on it, this says 7.5 square metres on the plan that has been submitted, which is above the space standard, which is 7.2 square metres.
The space standard for the single bedroom has two criteria. It has an and. So it's an area and a width. So it might hit the 7.5 metres, but it also has to be at least 2.25 metres wide as per the update. So I take your point. It might get there in terms of area. There's also a second dimension that needs to be taken into account.
Right, if there are no further questions, we're going to debate. This is something new.
Sorry. This application was going to be at the planning meeting 2 months ago, and then it was deferred in part because of the Ringwood neighbourhood plan. So I just wondered what has happened since then, because nothing seems to have changed, and the letter from Ringwood Town Council says that we're disappointed that at no point since July have the developers sought to engage with the Town Council, nor have NFDC officers undertaken any further consultation with us. It just seems very disappointing that in that 2 months, nobody seems to have talked to the Town Council, apparently, about their very big concerns. What has happened in those 2 months? That's the question.
In terms of the last couple of months, there's been no further submissions from the applicant in terms of making further amendments. There's been no formal reconsultation with the Town Council because of that. What we've done over the last couple of months is revise and review the report that was in that agenda in July to take account of the fact that the neighbourhood plan is now adopted, reviewed the relevant parts of the report in accordance with the policies that are now adopted, and we've come to a view, hence the recommendation is still one that's favourable in terms of the outcome for the application. I'm not aware there has been any engagement with the Town Council because from an assessment point of view, there hasn't been any fundamental change to the application as submitted. The change has been the status of the neighbourhood plan. And you'll be mindful that the July committee meeting was 2 days after the general election, which at the same time we held the referendum. And there was a need to update the report and fully consider, appropriately so, the status of the neighbourhood plan. And that's one of the reasons it was pulled from the agenda, was so that we could give full regard to the neighbourhood plan, which the report has been adjusted to do in my mind.
Thank you very much. We will now go into debate. Councillor Glass.
Thank you. It's been a very interesting application, this one. Although we need a lot of houses, this fails to meet the objectives of Ringwood local plan. It doesn't give a mix of housing that would be really give the maximum benefit to the area. And also the roads, well, we've got one, but the others might ever go on. I would propose that we reject it on the grounds that it doesn't meet the Ringwood plan. It doesn't give the best mix of housing to benefit the area, and the road access needs to be sorted out. Thank you.
You will need a seconder, but we'll continue with debate. Thank you. Does anybody else have anything to say? Councillor Hawkins.
I'm very, 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 very disappointed with the fact that the neighbourhood plan and the local plan have been totally ignored. Why are we going down this road of spending lots of money and making neighbourhood plans for the future when they're not being listened to? It's a waste of time and effort. And, you know, in this case, I think it's wrong because we're building for the future and we need the future to be right for the residents that are be moving into this area. So I'm very disappointed in the fact that the neighbourhood plan and local plans haven't been really adhered to. Thank you.
Councillor Brand.
I agree with the last two comments. A lot of effort has been spent on the Ringwood plan. And even the NFDC itself state that the environmental design is not good enough. And we're supposed to be building places that we want to look good, feel good, be nice places to live and grow up in. And I get that we've got to build loads of houses and we need loads of houses, but we don't want to build just houses that fulfill a need, but not a longer term need or a good need. We need to be designing properly for the future. And I'm not sure. I feel that if we let this go, that we're going to just go down a slippery slope, really.
Thank you. Councillor Dowd.
Yes, my concern is obviously that the language of the report has to be considered and balanced, and we have words like acceptable, and there's a meaning for acceptable. It doesn't sound very, very promising, and we have to balance that with maybe some slightly more emotive language from people who are against the plan. And a lot of these plans, we have to have a balance. We have to be mindful. In any neighbourhood plan, it deals in more detail than our local plan at a local level, and the consultation process is important, and it does reflect local view of what is wanted and needed in a local area. So it's not an easy one, but I think the number of clear, specific objections is a concern. The fact that there are 5 of our own local plan issues and there are 6 neighbourhood plan issues, I think is really quite an important point for us to weigh up. Thank you.
Councillor Woods.
I concur with the previous speakers. I've been personally trying to encourage all local town council to go ahead with a neighbourhood plan. And if they hear in such cases as this that you do a neighbourhood plan and it's disregarded, what enthusiasm will there be for town councillors to go forward with the neighbourhood plan? So I concur with the previous speakers that I think a lot more thought should have gone into the preparation of this application. Thank you.
Councillor Crizell.
I agree with the previous speakers, and I think it's a shame that there wasn't an opportunity. Well, there was an opportunity to speak to locals about the local plan. I'm also very unhappy about the number of small houses that are on that plan. I understand that's a financial issue, that the developer has to make money, but I'm very unhappy with that. Sorry.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything to say? So before we come back to the speakers, we have a recommendation to refuse by Councillor Glass. Do we have a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Brand. So I'll now come back to the speakers, and you have 1 minute each. So we'll go to Sarah Booden first.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say, just reiterate again that this is an allocated site within the adopted local plan. There is a significant shortfall of housing, as you're probably all aware, within the district, which currently sits at just over a 3-year supply out of 5 years. And I know the officers has referred to and made a lot in the report about the tilted balance and the benefits that housing will bring, including the affordable housing. It does include a policy compliant in line with that local plan, with the strategic policies, and the NPPF tells us that those strategic policies include those for housing, and in that regard, they outweigh neighbourhood plan policies. So there is a strategic policy we're talking about here in terms of the affordable housing and also the mix of dwellings on site. And yes, they do include a lot of smaller dwellings, but they include the larger as well. In response to the councillor's comments about the number of smaller units, that's actually a policy within the neighbourhood plan as well. So there is a demand, and that's acknowledged within the neighbourhood plan. So I would just urge councillors just to consider the fact that there is a lack of housing, and there is a need to provide that and yeah, thank you.
Ledebuse.
Thank you, Chair. I feel that the applicant has stated there is sufficient smaller housing. It all hangs on whether or not you believe a study is a bedroom. And unless you covenant that study will always be used as a study, you cannot guarantee that it is not a bedroom. And if it is used as a bedroom, then there will be only 3% 2-bedroom properties in phase 1. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Councillor Heron.
Chairman, most of it has been said. Unfortunately, I still consider this a poorly designed development, looking at a developer trying to get their money back as soon as possible when they didn't manage to assemble the site ahead of purchase. I concur with everyone that you can call it what you like, study, bedroom, whatever you like. We could always put a 106, put a legal agreement on that stops anyone from occupying that. And then we would step past that. I'm sure the applicants would be delighted with that and will now say that they're happy to go ahead with that.
Councillor Hayward.
Thank you, Chair. There's not much further to be said than that. As committee members have mentioned and speakers have mentioned, the need for the lower rungs of the ladder to be in place in Ringwood, the lower rungs of the housing ladder, is absolutely paramount. It really was probably one of the #1 things that came out of the neighbourhood plan development. There was a real passion amongst all the members, and the evidence base was developed for that as part of the neighbourhood plan. That's why it passed examination, and then it got the democratic mandate that it did. It's really, really important that with big, as I said, the biggest development that's likely, conform with that part of the neighbourhood plan, because that's for all the people's futures. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'll just give the last word to Mark Wyatt. Thank you.
Chairman, thank you. I just wanted to come back on a couple of points that were made, both in the motion that's now on the floor, and also with regards to a couple of the comments that were made by the speakers in those closing comments. I think Councillor Glass put his motion on the floor, and I've noted down, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm probably going to need some help with you, or I'm probably going to need some help with your reasons for refusal. You said we need houses, it fails to be compliant with the Ringwood Neighbourhood Plan and doesn't give a mix. I'm going to go to the report, page 58. The report sets out that the proposal provides for 202 45.6, round up to 46 if you like, % smaller 1 and 2 bed dwellings across all tenures out of the total of 443. So you've got nearly half of the units are smaller homes. at the 1 and 2 bed dwellings. So that was probably the first point I'd like to make. In terms of commentary about neighbourhood plans not being taken into account, there's narrative in your update paper about that. I would disagree that we've disregarded, was another word was used, disregarded or have not taken the neighbourhood plan into account. The report acknowledges when there's conflict and simply suggests that everything goes into the mix, and you have to balance that as part of your assessment and your conclusions, as Councillor Dowd suggested you need to do very carefully. It's not an easy one, but if we were looking at Councillor Glass's narrative on we need houses, it doesn't give a mix and it fails to accord with the neighbourhood plan, I'd probably ask for you to give me some policy basis to support that, if I've summarised it right, first of all, but also something to think about in light of what the applicant has said before you take your vote. This is an allocated site in your local plan. It's an allocated strategic site which will deliver a significant number of homes. And just to put it to you, I wonder if a better motion might be to seek deferral of the application for us to engage with the applicant, engage with the town to try and get a better outcome, because it's an allocated site. It's not a hostile application, it's not a greenfield application, it's a site allocation. And that might be a more constructive rather than obstructive way of progressing matters. If you disagree with me and you want to move with the motion that's on the floor, then, as I said, I think I'd like a little bit more help from you, please, with some policies of which we're going to link this to.
Thank you. You say that I said we need housing, which I did, but what I did say was this application doesn't give an adequate mix that would give the maximum benefit to the area in the future. Now, that is not what you've got written down, because I think the site, although we need the housing, could be much better used for the type of housing that they're asking for in the Ringwood plan. So I think we failed the area by even thinking about this. Thank you.
Councillor Cressell, did you want to add something to that?
I would like to suggest that we defer for more conversation.
Well, we have to go to the refusal first, because that's the first one on the table, and then I'll come back.
If it is deferred, what will happen?
Chairman, if you were to defer the application, I would suggest that as officers we would have to engage with the applicant in light of the discussion, in light of the third-party speakers that we've heard today, engage with the town council even, to see if there's any room to negotiate and move the application forward with some further refinements to address the concerns of the committee and the concerns of the town council. Depending on the outcome of that, we could have changes which we'd consider, consult on, and would come back to you. It could be that we don't get anywhere, but we'd still have to come back to you. It just sort of buys us some time to have that conversation.
I get that, but the most important bit would be to talk to the town council. It's not to you guys to have the conversation. You've got to include the town council. We don't progress.
I agree. It would have to be a three-way conversation, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Glass, are you still sticking with your refusal?
I am, because if we accept this and defer it, it's going to achieve exactly the same thing.
Well, we can't make that assumption. The thing is, you haven't come up with reasons, I think, good enough at the moment for a refusal. Councillor Rickman.
I just indicate I would support the deferral and be happy to second that proposal.
I'm happy for a defer as well, so I will take my second away.
We now do not have a seconder for a refusal. Councillor Hawkins.
We're deferring.
Well, we haven't decided that yet. At the moment, we haven't got a seconder to refuse. And if we're not going to have one come forward, we'll go for the option to defer.
If we're going to listen to Ringwood Town Council as well as talk to them, I think I'm quite happy with the deferral.
Okay, fine. In that case, we have a recommendation to defer from Councillor Crozell, seconded by Councillor Rickman. All of those in favour of deferral, please raise your hands. Nine. And against? One abstention. So that will be deferred. Thank you all very much. That's been quite a long one, but I think we've covered a lot and we'll continue to do so. Members, I think you might want a break. If you can be back in the chamber by 11:15, please. Application, which is on page 141 of the agenda, application number 23/10707. I'm going to go straight to Mark on this one for...
Chairman.
Sorry?
Could I make a proposal that we follow what we did earlier and defer this? It makes eminent sense not to go through a whole rigmarole and waste people's time. It's the obvious thing to do.
Okay, I was going to say that, but I wanted to give Mark a chance to say something first.
Chairman, Vice Chairman, I've got nothing further to add. It seems eminently sensible to me, given the relationship of item 3B to the last application. So I'm quite happy with the recommendation from your Vice Chairman.
Thank you. If there's no objections, I have a seconder, Councillor Crozell. So if there are no objections, we'll go straight to the vote, and that's to defer. So this has been proposed by Councillor Rickman and seconded by Councillor Crozell. All in favour, please raise your hands. Okay, we'll now go to the next application then, which is land north of Salisbury Road, Calmore. Page 171 on your agenda, application number 23/10268. I have one speaker, Mr. Rob White from White Peak Planning. But first we'll go to Ian Rayner for presentation, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, members. The application before you is a major development proposal that seeks reserved matters approval for 269 dwellings and related infrastructure on part of Strategic Site 1 to the north of Totton and on land which is within Netley Marsh Parish. Following the approval of outline planning permission for up to 280 dwellings on this site in January 2023, this application seeks approval of all outstanding reserved matters comprising the layout, scale and appearance of the development, as well as the landscaping of the site. So this is the location plan that was submitted with the application. You will see that the site, which extends to about 17.5 hectares, is situated to the north of Salisbury Road and to the west of Hill Street. You can also see a small number of dwellings adjoining the site. So you have Four Winds and Brook House along Salisbury Road here, and then Carnoustie House along Hill Street here. And then Green Lane, which extends from Hill Street down through here to Salisbury Road, is a public right-of-way. The application has been submitted jointly by Blore Homes and the Barker Mill Estate, who are the owners of the application site. This next plan here shows a little bit more of the local context. You can see that the site is situated to the east of the A326 Totton Western Bypass and to the south of the M27. You can also see Teswood Lakes, which are situated here to the east of Hill Street. Then here you can see from this aerial photograph that the application site is predominantly agricultural land at present. Again, you can see the A326 Totton Western bypass and its junction here with the M27 to the north. Looking at the application site itself, you can see that the site comprises a number of fields with a small group of farm buildings set in the southern corner of the site close to Salisbury Road. You'll note the fairly mature hedgerow boundaries that run through the centre of the site and closer to Hill Street. And you'll also note this small triangular area of woodland known as Hatton's Plantation. What you can't see from this image is the site's topography. The site is gently sloping. The land rises up from the southeastern corner of the site to the site's northern boundary before the land then drops down again to the north of the site. So to provide you with some context, I'll just show you a few photos, starting with these two. This tree on the left-hand image is a tree that would be retained within a focal space at the entrance to the proposed development. The right-hand image here is taken from the southeast corner of the site from Green Lane and is looking into the site. Then here we're to the north of Hatton's Plantation. The left-hand image looks towards Green Lane. Those trees are along Green Lane. And you've got Hatton's Plantation there. And then the right-hand image, you've got Hatton's Plantation on the left. You're looking towards a line of mature trees there, which run through the centre of the site and which will form the focus of part of the proposed ANRG. Here we've moved closer to the northern edge of the site. This one is looking westwards. You can just about see the property Four Winds here in the distance. And then the right-hand image is looking towards the line of trees that is a key landscape feature through the centre of the site. These two images are much closer to that landscape feature, which, as I've said, will be set within an area of proposed ANRG that will run through the middle of the site. Here we've moved to the eastern part of the site. The left-hand image looking south towards Hatton's Plantation, which you can see in the distance there. And then the right-hand image looking west towards the central landscape feature that I've referred to. And then these last two photographs are close to Hill Street, the northeastern edge of the site. So you can see some of the buildings there along Hill Street. So to put the application in context, outline planning permission was, as I have already mentioned, granted for up to 280 dwellings in January 2023. The detailed access proposals were approved through the outline planning permission, leaving layout, scale, appearance and landscaping as matters for reserved matters approval. Those four reserved matters are the detailed proposals that are before you today. The outline application was subject to 38 conditions, a number of which required specific details to be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority, either as part of this reserved matters application or through a separate discharge of condition application. The relevant conditions that need to be considered through this application are all set out in the committee report. The outline application or permission was also subject to a Section 106 legal agreement that secured the provision and delivery and future management and maintenance of ANRG, public open space and other green infrastructure, and it also secured a policy compliant level and mix of affordable housing, various transportation contributions to ensure the development's transportation impacts are satisfactorily mitigated, a proportionate education contribution, and also other contributions necessary to ensure the development impacts on protected habitats and species are satisfactorily mitigated. From a policy perspective, the site forms the northernmost part of Strategic Site 1. You can see here the local plan concept master plan, which shows the full extent of the strategic site allocation. And then here outlined in red, you can see the area of land affected by the current application proposals. The master planning objectives for the site, as reflected in this plan, are to create a well-designed and integrated extension to Totton. More specific requirements are to create an integrated network of natural green spaces and to set the development behind the ridgeline on the site's northern and northwestern edges. So in terms of what was approved at outline stage, this plan shows the approved access arrangements onto Salisbury Road. You can see that 2 accesses have been approved, a primary access served by a new roundabout, and then a second access that would be situated about 190 metres to the east of the main access. These 2 access points are fixed by the outline planning permission. As part of the outline planning permission, 2 parameter plans were approved. This is the first one, which sets the framework for where the areas of housing and green infrastructure are expected to be provided. In simple terms, the yellow areas are where the housing is expected to be provided, while the green areas are where the green infrastructure should be provided. The second parameter plan shows the existing trees and hedgerows on site and highlights those that would be lost and those that would be retained. There would be some hedgerow removal to accommodate the development, notably part of a hedgerow along Salisbury Road, but the more mature hedgerows, tree belts and Hatton's plantations are all required to be retained. There are 2 other illustrative plans that formed an important part of the outline planning permission. The first is this landscape framework plan, showing how the areas of green infrastructure were intended to link together to provide an appropriate setting for the development. And then secondly, we have this illustrative master plan, which showed a broad brush layout for how the site might be developed. And that plan and all of the other plans submitted with the outline planning permission have then led to this plan, which is a detailed layout plan of the site, which you are being asked to consider and determine today. The layout plan generally accords with the parameter plans approved at outline stage. Some of the things to highlight are the access roads. So you can see that a new road will come off the approved roundabout junction, and that this road will effectively become the spine of the new development. Off this central road are a number of roads serving different areas of the development, and all of which terminate in vehicular cul-de-sacs. And then you'll also note that coming off the secondary access onto Salisbury Road is another road which then joins up with the main spine road here. You can see that there is significant green infrastructure that is a feature of the development, including along the whole of the northern edge and through the centre of the site into the site's southeastern corner. One of the things to note on this plan are some of the other residential developments close to the site where there is either planning permission or a resolution to grant planning permission. This includes at Brook House to the southwest and off Hill Street to the east of the site. Now, so that you can see the layout in a little bit more detail, I'll just show you some more zoomed in plans, starting with the southeastern corner. Here you note you have a significant area of green infrastructure. There is a drainage attenuation pond here on what is the lowest part of the site, which would have a permanent wet pond area. There would be a walkway all around this feature as part of the ANRG provision, which would provide valuable amenity. You will see this plan shows pedestrian connections to Green Lane, and then you can see Hatton's Plantation here as well. There's a small pumping station that would be provided to the south of Hatton's Plantation, which would be carefully landscaped. 4 play areas would be provided across the development, the smallest of which you can see here, which would be located just to the west of the plantation, overlooked by new houses. You can see the houses which frame the street, And you'll note the change of road surface here, which alongside the dwellings overlooking this space is designed to create a key focal space within the development. Alongside Salisbury Road, you'll see that the dwellings are set well back from the road and would overlook a strip of public open space that would be landscaped with new trees and planting. So this next slide shows the southwestern part of the development. A key feature to note here is the focal green space at the main entrance to the development. You'll note that there's a group of buildings clustered around this space, including 2.5-storey buildings and a 3-storey flatted building here close to the roundabout. Careful consideration has gone into the design of these buildings and this space to ensure that there is a strong and attractive entrance to the new development. Again, you'll notice the change in road surface materials to provide definition to the space. And you'll see the existing tree within this space there. On the western side of the image, you'll note the area of public open space here, within which would be one of the larger children's play areas. Then here, this is the main central part of the development. You'll see that the central area of green infrastructure will go through the middle of the site, extending northwards from Hatton's Plantation to the northern edge of the site. You'll see a second drainage attenuation feature to the north side of Hatton's Plantation. This is intended to be a drier basin than the one to the south of the plantation, and it has been designed to offer amenity for those living on the development. You'll see that there is a play area within the central area of green infrastructure here, and you'll note the green infrastructure extending along the northern edge. You'll also note how the central spine road crosses through the development, and where it crosses the central ANRG here, it narrows with a change of materials to ensure the ANRG is not severed in a way which would harm its usability. And then you can see that there's another focal area here to the east of the central ANRG, denoted by the change of road materials again. Other features to note are a linear green space here, which provides connectivity and appropriate setting for an area of the site where the development is slightly more intensive. And then also to note the pedestrian pathways and links through the green infrastructure, all of which helps provide connectivity and valuable amenity. And then this is the northeastern part of the site. This part, as you can see, is heavily dominated by green infrastructure extending along the northern edge towards Hill Street. You'll note another larger play area within the green infrastructure here. As a whole then, officers considered that the layout of the development is responsive to its context, taking appropriate account of the site's landscape features and topography. The layout includes suitable levels of parking for vehicles and cyclists, while providing a network of off-road paths for both pedestrians and cyclists that will meet sustainability and amenity objectives. In terms of green infrastructure, this plan shows the areas of ANRG and public open space more precisely. The orange areas denote those areas that would be classed as public open space. The green areas denote areas that would be classed as ANRG. Although on the ground, the two areas should blend seamlessly. The plan demonstrates that the quantum of both ANRG and open space would exceed minimum policy requirements, and officers are satisfied that the spaces would be appropriately distributed. One thing to note along the northern edge are two proposed agricultural access points that cross the green infrastructure. These access points are not defined as either ANRG or public open space. As such, to ensure that there would be no barrier to public access across these agricultural crossing points, there will be a need to secure a deed of variation to the existing Section 106 legal agreement before the application is determined. Now, one of the key considerations is to ensure that the development delivers an appropriate housing mix. This plan illustrates that mix. The yellows, oranges and reds show 2, 3 and 4 bed open market dwellings respectively, while the greens, blues and purples show affordable housing units. It is considered that the mix of dwellings has the necessary balance that one would expect a development of this size and reasonably meets the requirements of the outline planning permission and policy. Then this next plan shows the location and tenure of affordable housing units. The development would meet the policy requirement to provide 35% of the dwellings for affordable housing. The required tenure split would also be met, and officers are satisfied that the affordable housing would be appropriately distributed across the site to create a balanced and cohesive new development. Then this next plan gives you a clearer perspective of the scale of the development. The two darkest blue that you can see here, down here and here, are the 3-storey flatted buildings, one, as I say, by the main entrance and one in the more central part of the development. Lighter violet blue buildings that you can see are 2.5 stories high. These tend to be clustered around key focal points of the development. Most of the development is denoted by the medium blue, which is 2 stories high, whilst the light blue that you can see on the northern edge, one of the highest parts of the site, would be bungalows. Officers consider that the scale of the development as a whole is responsive to its context, whilst providing sufficient variation to achieve good design. Then here we have a materials plan. The materials palette will be quite complementary. Strong use of red brick, but with some use of tile hanging, cladding and render to provide variety and give character to different parts of the development. Moving on to some of the landscaping details, this shows different boundary treatments. Officers have worked to ensure that there will be good quality walled boundaries where private gardens or key spaces are adjacent to the public realm. Then here we have a hard landscaping plan for areas of the site that will not be adopted public highway. There is an appropriate mix of materials here, including block paving for shared private drives at the head of cul-de-sacs. The application is accompanied by detailed landscaping plans that show the new planting and associated infrastructure. So here in the northeastern corner of the site, we'll see significant areas of new planting and a network of paths that will link to Hill Street. In this northeastern corner, there is an opportunity to have a more of a bespoke off-lead dock exercise area. Here you can see a continuation of the pathways through the green infrastructure, and again, significant new native planting to provide an attractive setting for the development. Here you'll see that the pathways link right to the existing public right-of-way network in the southwestern corner of the site. And then here you can see some of the landscaping proposals for the southeastern part of the site, including the 2 attenuation ponds. As a whole, officers consider that the landscaping proposals are thoughtful and sympathetic and will ensure the development has an attractive setting whilst offering enhancements for biodiversity and good amenity for residents. The landscaping will ensure the areas of ANRG are attractive to use and therefore effective in mitigating recreational impacts on protected habitats and species. Then this next slide shows one of the main play areas within the central ANRG space. You can see one of the features here is a rope bridge walk across the space, which should be quite an appealing feature for children to use. And then here are the designs of the other 3 play areas. Together, they meet policy requirements and are considered to be quite innovative, working with the landscape, but providing necessary variety of play opportunities for children of different ages. This next plan just shows you a little bit more detail of the southern attenuation drainage feature, how it would be landscaped and contoured, and you'll note the intention to create a raised boardwalk with a viewing platform, which should help to draw people into using this part of the ANRG. I'll just now show you some of the elevational drawings, a selection of them. starting with some of the larger buildings. So here we've got the three-storey flatted building that would be situated adjacent to the main entrance to development. Careful consideration has gone into the design of this building to ensure it has the necessary design quality at what is a key location at the entrance to the site. Officers consider the building to be well proportioned and articulated, and it is felt appropriate both in terms of scale and appearance. This is the other three-storey building, quite different in appearance, and designed to complement other buildings within the part of the site where it would be located. You'll note the use of cladding here to break up the massing of the building. Then here, I can show you an example of a group of 2.5-storey buildings. These ones are sort of fairly close to the main entrance, looking over the focal space, the focal green space. Now, officers consider these buildings to be attractive, well detailed. You'll notice the porch detailing, the window detailing, the use of chimneys, and indeed the use of tile hanging and the linking roofs, all of which combine to create an attractive group of buildings around the main entrance space. Here's an example of a 2.5-storey detached dwelling. Again, you'll notice some of the detailing that I've referenced in the previous image. Here, two contrasting unit types. The top shows a flat over garage known as Fogs within the central part of the site, and then the lower image shows one of the terraces of 4 dwellings. And then here you've got 2 examples of terraces of 3. You'll note the upper terrace with its porches, chimneys, window detailing is more richly detailed than the lower terrace. Across the development, there's been an attempt to create a hierarchy where around key focal spaces and along key edges, dwellings are given a more elevated appearance through a greater richness of detailing, whilst simpler detailing is used elsewhere. And you can see that same principle applied here for these 2 examples of semi-detached dwellings in different parts of the development. Looking at the detached dwellings, here you've got 2 examples of dwellings with gable-ended forms. And then moving on, you've got 2 examples of dwellings with hipped roofs. You'll note the deployment here of render on one of the buildings, which helps to break up the predominant red bricks that would be used across the development. Finally, in terms of house types, here are 2 bungalows that would be used on the northern part of the site. So to give you more context, here are some street scene images. You can see a little bit more, get a little bit more of an idea of how this development responds to the site's sloping topography here. And then again, you can see further street scene images for different parts of the site. Again, you'll see how the development works with some of the slopes. Now, to give you a little bit more perspective to what different parts of the development could look like, I can show you a few CGI images. I'll just add a cautionary note to say that they do give an idealised image of what the development would look like, so perhaps take them with a little bit of caution. Nevertheless, they do help to give a clearer understanding of the development proposals. So here you've got a CGI of what the main sort of focal entrance area could look like, looking across the green space with the dwellings overlooking that space. This image shows the secondary entrance space, including the smallest of the 4 play areas. Again, you can see houses overlooking that space. Here, we've moved into the central part of the site, 3-storey flatted block, and some of the dwellings which will overlook that central green linking space. And then this is the northern edge of the site, and showing the dwellings looking out onto that northern edge, the ANRG and public open space. So officers have carefully considered the detailed designs of the dwellings and associated buildings and are satisfied that they would be of an acceptable appearance. Now, I cannot cover everything in this presentation in the same level of detail as in the written report, but I would highlight that the impact of the development upon neighbouring properties, trees, ecological interest, highway safety have all been given due consideration. and officers are satisfied that the detailed development proposals are acceptable in all of these respects. Summing up then, we have a reserved matters application for 269 dwellings. The proposals are considered to meet the requirement, conditions and obligations of the outline planning permission and associated section 106 legal agreement. Importantly, the scheme will deliver an appropriate quantity and quality of ANRG, public open space and evergreen infrastructure. And also importantly, the development will provide an appropriate amount and mix of affordable housing, as well as a suitable mix of open market housing, therefore making a significant contribution to meeting the district's housing needs. Finally, officers consider the layout, scale and appearance of the development and the landscaping of the site will deliver a development that will be well designed, both visually and functionally. The development is considered to respond well to its context and will be a sympathetic addition to the north of Totton. The development is considered to comply with sustainability objectives and to be consistent and compliant with the policies of the local plan as well as national planning policy. As such, the recommendation of officers is that reserved matters approval be granted, subject to conditions and subject to the prior completion of a deed of variation to the Section 106 legal agreement as set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much for an excellent presentation. And I repeat, and I've said it before, that the quality of these reports are exceptional, even the ones that we refuse. The amount of work that goes into them over the years is exceptional, and we thank you all for that. So we'll go then to our first speaker, our only speaker, I think, Rob White, White Peak Planning Limited. You have 3 minutes.
Chair, members and officers, on behalf of Bloor Homes, we are delighted that this application can be considered today and offer our thanks to your officers for enabling this to happen and to Mr Rayner in particular for his assistance and his comprehensive report. The development forms part of the North of Totton Strategic Site 1 and by providing a new roundabout on Salisbury Road, it will help bring forward the remainder of the strategic site. We are also working with nearby commercial developers and Southern Water to agree a comprehensive upgrade to the sewage infrastructure that will serve the wider area. We have agreed the design of a new shared footway and cycleway to the south of the A46 Salisbury Road that will improve access from the strategic site down to Calmore and the schools and community facilities located there. In its more local context, our proposals respond to and enhance the farmland setting and include naturalistic play spaces that are interwoven through the proposed ANRG and public open space, which make up over 50% of the site. Weaving through the site and connecting to public rights of way beyond are a series of cycle and walking routes, including a dedicated area to the northeast where dogs will be able to exercise freely. The sustainable drainage systems have been designed to be accessible features for residents and new opportunities for wildlife. Overall, we will achieve a biodiversity net gain of over 15% for habitats and 25% for hedgerows. In terms of our proposals, the layout and design of the development has benefited from detailed and constructive engagement with your design and landscape officers, including a welcome post-lockdown return to meetings around the table with plans, pens and plenty of suggestions. This refinement process has resulted in a suite of bespoke new designs that reflect the local vernacular with influences from the New Forest. The new homes will meet the Future Home Standard with no gas supply and thereby be net zero carbon ready, incorporating energy efficiency into their design along with photovoltaic collectors and heat recovery systems. Each dwelling will have a dedicated electric vehicle charging point and secure cycle storage. We are proud of these proposals, which will provide well-designed new homes set in an attractive and engaging environment within which families can live and grow. We trust you agree and can resolve to grant approval so that we can move forward to deliver this much-needed housing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, questions, please. Councillor Glass. Councillor Hawkins.
Well, I've been rechristened. Yes, Mr. White. I've got two questions. One is cladding, and that's all been in the news and on telly over the last few weeks. Hopefully the cladding that you use, despite whatever the manufacturers say, is fire retardant. And hopefully that all the houses that you're building will be run on green energy. That's solar panels and the heating indoors, not the gas that was mentioned earlier on. Thank you.
Yeah, just to confirm, our cladding is nothing like the cladding you'll see on high-rise buildings, and it's fire retardant. And in terms of the new homes, as I mentioned, there won't be any gas supplied to this site. The dwellings will be heated and hot water by electric energy, and we'll have photovoltaic collectors on the roofs of most of the dwellings, as well as heat recovery systems within them.
Councillor.
Can I ask a question around the concerns of Hampshire Swifts, that the Swift bricks, they recommend one per household, and that according to this, there's only going to be a fewer number incorporated. And my second question would be, just for my own information, where there's a pumping station, pond and a woods, what are the health and safety issues around with children being on the estate and getting into these sort of areas?
Forgive me, I can't remember the exact number, but I think we have over 30 nest boxes on the dwellings that will provide new nesting opportunities for swifts, but also other birds. We also have a similar number of bat boxes, and we have a load of bee bricks as well. So I think we feel, and officers feel, we've made provision for swifts and other wildlife. Hampshire swifts, obviously an interest in swifts, and they're like swift nest boxes everywhere, but there's a balance to what we're providing. In terms of the pumping station, that from at ground level, you won't see anything. They're all underground, and it'll have a secure fence that's then landscaped around the outside. So there's no danger of anyone getting in there. Once you know what they look like, which is pretty niche, you'll see them everywhere on new developments, but there's no access to them, and everything's below the ground.
Are there any issues around the pond? Or?
No, the pond, both I'd use the word attenuation basin. It's a bit technical because they're not big ponds. A lot of the time they're dry. The one on the front will have some permanent water, but the slopes down the side of the pond are quite shallow. There's step features, so they meet all the safety standards. There's no need to fence them. We wouldn't want that. So they're large depressions really, rather than ponds with steep sides.
Any more questions? Councillor Riley.
At the top end of the site, does that go right out to Hill Street? Or the very, very top, you've got houses there and you've got some green area. Does that go out to Hill Street? Is there access, will there be access from Hill Street in there?
Yes, there will. There'll be a pedestrian access from Hill Street into the...
But there's not a road, it won't be a road?
No.
Okay, thank you. And the other point I want to make, what about parking? There's quite a lot of flats there. What about parking? What parking have you got for that?
As Mr. Rayner explained, the parking proposals meet all the parking standards. So there's parking for some of the flats in overlooked courtyards. We've got some car barns over on the southeastern side, and some, as you saw, some with the flats over garages, some parking through. You go through there into the courtyards behind.
Are there any more questions? Councillor Crizell.
It's a really silly question, but those chimneys, do they go into a fireplace?
Just sit on the top.
Why are they up there?
They are ornamental. Chimneys do provide articulation to dwellings. They add visual interest, but these chimneys are purely ornamental.
Thank you.
Councillor.
On that note, I noticed that I've seen these chimney units being fitted on site, so I know it's a sort of integral box. But on one of the developments you showed was a very tall stack off a different, whether it's a bungalow arrangement, and I wondered if that was actually for an open fire. Keep going.
I think this
That
is
one?
probably the image
The
you're,
top one, yeah.
you're referring to. Yes.
That's a tall stack.
My understanding is that is ornamental as well. So they are all ornamental. That one's just slightly more ornamental than some of the others.
Yeah, that's just been confirmed by the developer. Are there any more questions? If not, we'll go into debate. Councillor Crizell.
I sit here thinking what a great plan it is, and I'm impressed with law on a general basis anyway. What worries me is that there's not lots of questions from people in Totton like there are in Ringwood. Is it because we're all apathetic, or is it because it's a good plan? I should wait to see what other people think.
Any more comments? Wow. Nobody wants to... Councillor Rickman.
Let's just see how we're going. I'll propose the recommendation.
Okay. Are you all happy to proceed then without more debate? In that case, I'll come back to the applicant. You have 1 minute to respond.
I just to confirm on the consultation point, throughout the whole outline process and this reserved matters, we've consulted with the town council and parish council, and they've recommended approval as well. So we have consulted with the local community. Thank you.
In that case, we'll go to the vote. So this is a reserved matters application, and the recommendation is to grant, and that's been proposed by Councillor Rickman and seconded by Councillor Hawkins. All of those in favour, please raise your hand. Unanimous. That's been granted. Thank you very much. Interest, please. Councillor Glass. Can you put your microphone on?
I spoke on this when it last came up as an application. I've been advised that I can speak as a district councillor, sorry, as a ward councillor. And do you want me to move over to here? Okay.
Okay, so this is agenda item 4 on your agenda. It's actually page 203 on the agenda, not 205 as is stated. This is Gangwerley Farm, Newlands Road, Fawley, application number 21/11329. And we will have one speaker, Councillor Glass, who will be speaking as a ward councillor. So if I can go for the presentation, please. James, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, Gangwerley Farm. Many of you will recall an application that was brought to this committee over 2 years ago, proposing to develop the site outlined in red for 19 dwellings, demolishing the existing property and making use of some small fields adjacent to that property. The site is outside the built-up area, so in the open countryside, on Newlands Road, adjacent to the Gangwerley recreation grounds, the Scout Hall and the Men's Club or men's shed type facility, and the parish council compound. on the side of the gangway area open space. Put in a bit more context, it's close to the oil refinery, which I'm sure you're familiar with, in Fawley Road. You see the residential areas to the east, to the south, and to the west of the gangway area crossroads. So members will recall this application was brought to you, as I say, 2 years ago with a recommendation to approve. Hopefully you'll appreciate from the committee update why this is being brought back to you. And I'll run through some of the scheme again for those of you who weren't either on committee or on planning committee at the time, so at least you can appreciate the scheme that was before you and why I'm inviting you to review the recommendation today. Fair amount of planning policy context around the site, blue areas being the open spaces, the gangway area recreation ground that I've described already. Black lines showing the built-up areas, the residential areas of the settlements of the towns, villages around the site. And you get a sense there that whilst the site is outside those built-up areas, it's not extensively unsustainable in that it is still close and was considered to be readily accessible to the services and facilities that are in those settlements. It's close to the national park, but separated by built form. And some landscape areas, but the site itself was devoid of any of the designations itself. Aerial photo showing the site as it is, residential property where I'm pointing the cursor at the moment, and then the field that I described adjacent to it. Few photos, so there you can see the house through the trees there and the hedgerow that's along the front. For those of you familiar with the site, these are my photos from the application as it was in 2021-22 before it came to committee. So this hedgerow may well have recovered from the fire that it had suffered at that time. But that's Newlands Road and the access point. The field next to the site that was subject to the application as well and proposals. And further hedgerow landscape setting around it, and then the junction to the, what would it be, the east of the site. And this was raised as a concern by local residents and probably debated at committee about the safety of the additional vehicle movements through that junction. It was accepted by Highways that it was safe, and the volume of traffic that this scheme would have generated wouldn't prejudice the safety of that site, and the recommendation before the committee in 2022 was supported. Built form context opposite the site, and just to remind you of what was behind the site in respect of the oil refinery in the background as part of the landscape and wider visual context. The scheme proposed a mix of houses and flats. And the key to it was, given its location outside the built-up area, proposed to be a rural exception site, and therefore was being proposed to us as 100% affordable housing. And it's that point that we very much stalled on in respect of progressing to making a decision, and why the application has come back to you today. The built form was considered to be acceptable, the design and the appearance was considered to be acceptable, and would, with the affordable housing element, make a positive contribution to delivering housing need in the district, and particularly that part of the district that these affordable housing units would be supporting. Now, coming to the planning balance and where we are today. So unfortunately, despite the time that has elapsed, we haven't been able to, well, I wouldn't say we haven't been able to, but it hasn't been possible to secure the Section 106 agreement, to secure the necessary contributions to mitigate the impact of the development on protected habitats in the area, in both the New Forest and the Solent, and secure the key and important factor of the affordable housing. As I say, that was an important element of making the scheme acceptable in 2022 to be in accordance with the HOU 5 policy that allows for residential development outside the settlement boundaries where it's meeting an affordable housing need. And it's that point that we very much stalled on with the applicant, who was unwilling to engage in preparation of a Section 106 agreement, to secure those affordable housing units. So whilst the scheme clearly had benefits in terms of meeting housing need and delivering houses and a mix of housing unit sizes and being in the affordable housing tenure, without that affordable housing and without the necessary mitigation to protect sensitive habitats, the economic, environmental and social benefits of delivering the scheme would be outweighed by that harm. So I'm inviting you today to accept that we have to refuse the application on the basis that without those elements the scheme is unacceptable and should therefore be refused.
Thank you. Councillor Glass, you have your 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. May I say, firstly, I was misquoted in the notes here. There is not, has not, and never will be a blast zone in Fawley. That is a total misconception, and I believe some of our senior officers are using it, and it is a very bad thing to do. But going back, I agree with the officer. It's an open countryside. The consultation zone it is where it is, not a blast zone. It's overdeveloped. It's building on land on open areas against SR3 and no longer affordable housing. So I agree totally that this should be refused.
Thank you. Members, questions, please. Councillor Down.
Yes, given that there is an absolute need for affordable housing, is it simply the fact it has to be 100%, or is there some movement on that that might encourage the developer to rethink that bit and actually engage?
One of the key elements of it was, because it's a rural exception site, the housing had to be preserved in perpetuity or retained in perpetuity as affordable housing. And that caused some challenges for the applicant's viability or affordability, deliverability. And we've never been invited to consider a mix of affordable and private market housing on this scheme. It was submitted to us as 100% affordable housing, and that's what we assessed it on the basis of. If the applicant wished to explore those options, he's never chosen to bring that to us as an option, and you know, we've dealt with it as it was presented to us as an application.
Are there any more questions?
I'd like to respond to Councillor Glass's comment about the explosion zone. That note that he referred to is, of course, the original report. I wasn't in a position to amend that for today, other than the update at the front. He raised it at committee at the time. I accepted his position that I was wrong in referencing the explosion zone, and he's quite correct that it is a consultation zone, and that was subject to some of the debate at the previous committee, and I've taken that on board for future references from that point onwards.
Thank you. Members, Councillor Rickman.
Thank you very much. And with regard to the advice given, I would like to propose the refusal today, and the fact that that may encourage some further debate for a good use of this site.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor. Anybody else have anything to say? In that case, I'll come back to Councillor Glass. Do you want to respond? 1 minute.
Just to say, the proposal just placed, I think, is a very good one. I'm glad we've realised about the explosion zone, because it's never, ever existed. And I'll watch the result.
In that case, we'll go to the vote. So the recommendation is to refuse. That's been proposed by Councillor Rickman, seconded by Councillor Cozell. All in favour, please raise your hands. And that's unanimous. That's unanimous, and that has been refused. We'll now continue with agenda item 24/10539 for West Grove Fording Bridge. On page 225 of your agenda, there are no speakers here, but we do have representation to be read. Yep, okay. So we'll go ahead with the presentation, please. Kate, if you'd like to go ahead.
Thank you very much. Right, so this is the planning application for 4 West Grove Fording Bridge. Right, this application is for the conversion of attached garage into accommodation ancillary to the main dwelling. In front of you is the red line plan, which shows the site outlined. As you can see, it's in a small cul-de-sac, and it's in the built-up area of Fording Bridge. So this is the local context plan. So you can see it's to the northwest of the main high street of Fording Bridge, and it's accessed off Normandy Way. And it's in an established residential area. And this is the aerial photograph. As you can note from there, it's quite well treed in the wider area. Now this plan is to show you the constraints. The red line, the application site falls within the Fording Bridge Conservation Area. And this plan also shows the tree preservation order in the locality. There's a group of protected trees at the entrance of West Grove and a few others dotted around. As also the flood zone runs to the rear of the site and just clips the back of the property. So these are the existing elevations. So it's a modern property. Part of the development that was developed in the 1990s. So you can just see from there, it's got a attached double garage. And these are the proposed elevations. So the actual development won't alter the size or the form of the building. It's the external alterations are the changes to the garage doors will be lost, and you've got windows instead, which will be matching the existing dwelling house, and they'll be bricked up to match the existing brickwork. And there's external alterations as well with the enlarging of the rear door. And as you can see from that's the existing floor plans, and these are the proposed floor plans. So the proposed shows that the ground floor will be providing living, self-contained living accommodation with first floor bedroom, and there's 4 roof lights to serve the bedroom. And this block plan just shows the retention of the tree. There's a silver birch to the front of the property. This is, for the purposes of this application, it is not implicated at all. There's no, it doesn't form a constraint to the development. It could remain, it doesn't need to be removed to facilitate this development. Also from this plan, you can see the creation of a third car parking space, because obviously we'll be losing the garage, which would be in accordance with the parking standards. To the south of the site, you've got 1 to 4 Mill Court, which is a group of terrace properties, which you'll see in the photographs to follow. This is just a comparison, so you can see how it will change. So the material alterations to the building are not overly significant in the officer's opinion. Right, these are some of the photographs. So as you can see, it's at the end of the cul-de-sac. We've currently got a grassed area to the side, which will be replaced with gravel, which can be done under permitted development. And this is the adjacent dwellings, 1 to 4 Mill Court. I've put this photograph in to show the relationship, because there are some concerns about the roof lights on the elevation facing these properties. which have been conditioned to be obscure glazed and fixed shut unless, of course, they're 1.7 metres above the floor level of the room they're serving. That is to ensure the privacy to 1 to 4 Mill Court. This photograph shows the tree. I will just comment on that because Fordingbridge Town Council, that was one of their concerns, was the loss of the tree, and that has been repeated in some comments received from third parties. Silver birch does provide some amenity to the immediate close or the small development. It's in the conservation area, so it has a degree of protection. However, this tree has been, we consulted the tree officers and they did not think it was worthy of a tree protection order in its own right. As I said, this application, this development can be implemented with the retention of the tree. So the tree does not have any bearing on this application whatsoever. However, as you will see from my report, they have put a separate tree works application in to have the tree felled, which has been accepted. But as I said, this is quite separate from the implementation of this planning application. The picture on the right, you can see the views down the down West Grove. The door would be changing to a window, so it's going to have a limited impact on the street scene or the Fordingbridge Conservation Area, in my opinion. The recommendation is to approve. There are conditions applied to restrict the roof lights that I've already discussed, materials to match. There is a restriction on the use of the annex to make sure it stays as ancillary accommodation. Obviously, there was some concerns, again, from Fordingbridge Town Council about this, and we have had a statement supplied by the agent. And just to clarify that this is only required for the use of the owners for visiting family and friends. So I think that probably deals with most things. The additional parking space is secured to make sure that it doesn't have any on-road parking because it's quite limited. There was an update to the application. That was just a minor thing, just to to correct some notes about the plans. There were no further plans submitted. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we will go to questions, please. Councillor Brown.
Read out.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, representation to be read out. Thank you.
So I've got a representation from David and Eleanor Camp. I'm writing to provide further context and support for our planning application to convert our attached garage to our property. Over the past several months, we have dedicated a great deal of time and effort to researching what would be considered acceptable and appropriate within the guidelines, while also being mindful of the impact on our neighbours. In developing our plans, we took into account various restrictions, the existing footprint of the property and the broader needs of the community. This project holds significant importance for our family, particularly for the future of our 2 daughters. Having moved to this home 2.5 years ago, we see this as a valuable investment in making the most of our property for both immediate and long-term benefits. The additional space will allow us to accommodate visiting family members with a comfortable and private area of their own, complete with independent cooking and showering facilities. This is a practical and meaningful way for us to use the available space, offering convenience for extended family when we are at home and independence for them when we are not. In today's housing market, it's become increasingly difficult for young people to purchase homes of their own due to rising costs and affordability issues. The additional space will provide our daughters with the opportunity to live independently when they are older, while still staying connected to family. It offers a way to help them build a sense of responsibility and autonomy in a supportive environment. By investing in this project now, we hope to create a space that will give them more options for their future. Throughout this process, we have been committed to ensuring that our plans align with the needs and expectations of the local community. The proposed changes do not alter the physical footprint of the property, but rather focus on enhancing the interior usage and updating the decor. We have engaged with our neighbours and, with the exception of one, have received positive support from both within West Grove and in surrounding areas. It's important to emphasise that this project will not directly impact on any of our neighbours in a negative way. We sincerely hope that this letter provides additional clarity on the reasons behind our application and the steps we have taken to be mindful of all relevant factors. This project represents a positive and practical use of space for our family, and we believe it aligns with the interests of the wider community as well. Thank you for your time and consideration of our application.
Thank you. Now we go to questions. Councillor Hawkins.
The tree's gone.
Has it been, it's not been hacked out, has it? Tree's still there? Sorry? Yeah, I say, is the tree still there? Has it been taken down?
I visited the site back in July and the tree was still there.
Okay, what I would like to do is condition that the tree stays.
No, we can't. The tree people have already agreed they cannot put a TPO on it. There's no reason not to take it down.
There is no reason to take it down anyway.
Yeah, because it's the actual gravel's coming up around the house and the roots are causing a problem.
Seems very strange to ruin nature and...
Yeah, okay. Councillor Bryant?
I was going to ask about what is it going to be used for, which that answered, sort of. Should there be a condition that it can't be used for Airbnb or something if it's not already in there? Because I'm guessing that's what Fordingbridge are worried about. Okay, so they will have to come back. Yeah.
Yes, I was just having a quick look at which condition it was. Condition 5, the development hereby approved shall be used only as ancillary accommodation directly related to occupation of the existing dwelling at 4 West Grove, and shall not at any time be subdivided or otherwise occupied as an independent dwelling residential unit.
Cover holiday home. Doesn't mention holiday home.
I mean, there's no separate access to it. You have to go through the main house to get into it.
Chairman, if I can help in terms
Yeah.
of the question, the condition that the case was read out is quite clear that it should only be used as ancillary accommodation. So to my mind, tourism is not ancillary, so there'd be a conflict there.
Any more questions? Debate? Councillor Crizell.
I would love to have had this opportunity for my family and could have put my kids in it. It would have been wonderful. I'd like to propose be accepted.
Any more comments? In that case, we'll go straight to the vote. The recommendation is to grant. That's been proposed by Councillor Crizell, seconded by Councillor Woods. All in favour, please raise your hands.
6, 10.
Again, refuse? Abstain? 1 abstention. Thank you. So that has been granted. If we can just go to then now item 4 on the agenda, which is just to agree meeting dates for 2005, 2026. None of us know what we'll be doing then, but if you'd just like to verbally agree, please. The way things going. And 5, just to acknowledge the Human Rights and Equality Act. And then we're finished and you can go and have your lunch. Thank you all very much for attending. Thank you. Bye.